Hey everyone, today we'll be talking about beam presets and what the difference between some of these commonly used ones are. So starting from the project details page, if we go to add a new calculation and we click on wood beam, we can see that there's a variety of different presets we can start with. So starting from the first one, our generic beam is the very basic uh, beam module. So in the generic beam, if you were to open it, most of the it would be the most common type of beam, and there would be basically very little pre-filled out. And over on the generic flitch beam, we have a generic beam, but we've toggled on the flitch plate. So actually, we'll pop this open and wait for that to load, and we toggle add flitch plates. So the generic flitch beam and the generic beam only differ in that by default we add flitch plates in the generic flitch beam module. And then moving on from moving one over. So the floor joist, actually, we read out the spacing as well as the dead loads from the project details. So I'll have a quick glance over at. So here we can see that these loads are pulled from the project defaults, as well as the spacing of the joist are also set from project defaults to be 16 inches. So we'll point out where that can be changed. The loads can be changed here. Oop, that's the default roof load, sorry. The default floor loads can be changed here, so 10 PSF and 40 PSF. And if we were to change this, actually that any project references, so the beam we just opened, instead of 10 and 40, it'll now say 10 and 50. And so this is the floor joist, and that's the number that reads out of the project default. And moving one over, the floor girder does a very similar thing, except it doesn't have spacing because it's one larger, it's a girder beam. The ceiling joist will read off the ceiling loads from the project default. So we'll open that, have the default geometry, and these will read the project default 10 and 20 loads that are listed here. 20 in live load, and then 10, I guess, in superimposed dead load. One thing we want to know about ceiling joists is that ceiling joists also have a storage live load type, which reduces the load duration factor. From that over, the hip valley. So the hip valley preset actually also calculates slopes and projections. So if we open that, we can see from this diagram that instead of having to calculate how long this beam is based on the side length and the slope to this corner, it will automatically calculate the total material length. So the hip valley preset does this on top of referencing the loads from project defaults. We keep going. The rafter does a very similar thing, except instead of a diagonal diagonal beam, it's just a sloped beam. So actually, if we open this, we can also see here the diagram for this. So this shows that it's at a 6 to 12 slope, and it'll show both the actual and the gravity forces in the beam. And of course, with all of these, we can toggle the flitch plates, adding flitch plates on or off. So all of these presets can be made to work with flitch beam as a flitch beam. And then ridge beams also read off the roof loads from the project default. They're kind of like floor girders, except instead of reading floor loads, they use the roof loads. The roof headers are very similar, and the floor header and the floor girder are also very similar. The roof floor headers also include the self weight of the wall above them per the project defaults. So in the project defaults, we can go set our wall weights, which are noted here. So we'll include these as well. One thing to note about deck joists and deck beams is that they use the wet service condition, given that they're usually located outside, and they use different loads than the project default. So by default, we set it to 60 PSF per most building code, or we also set it to 40 PSF if the building code is defined as the IRC. And of course, these loads can be overwritten. And that's all. As always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions in the help button here. Thanks.